I knew something was off the second I saw that sign drifting down the creek. Yeah, my creek, a laminated private property sign just floating like it had given up on life, spinning slowly in the current like some sad little protest nobody listened to. And I remember just standing there thinking, no way they did this again. See, I had just moved out to this quiet edge of a neighborhood outside Asheville, not in the HOA, mind you, just close enough to hear about their nonsense. And the only reason I bought that piece of land was because it came with full creek rights, legally documented, surveyed, stamped, all that good stuff, which basically meant that stretch of water from the old wooden footbridge down to a bent sycamore tree was mine, not shared, not community adjacent, not open to interpretation, just mine. And apparently, that detail bothered someone. Her name was Cheryl Vance, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA, mid-50s, always walking around like she was campaigning for something nobody voted for, clipboard in one hand, giant sunglasses like she was dodging paparazzi in a cul-de-sac, and the kind of voice that sounded sweet until you realized it was just sugarcoating for control. First week I moved in, she told me my mailbox was non-compliant. Second week, it was my shed windows reflecting too much sunlight. Third week, she left a printed notice about aesthetic inconsistency because I had a different shade of gravel in my driveway. And every single time, I'd just smile and say, I'm not in your HOA. That should have been the end of it, but with Cheryl, it never is. So when I followed that floating sign downstream and saw what was actually happening, oh, I almost laughed, because sitting right there, on folding chairs like they were at a backyard barbecue, were Cheryl and two of her board members, casting fishing lines into my creek, cooler beside them, Bluetooth speaker playing some smooth jazz like they were in a spa commercial, and I just stood there for a second trying to process the audacity. I cleared my throat, loud, and Cheryl turns around slow, like she's been expecting me, gives me that smile. You know the one. I'm about to say something ridiculous, but I'm confident enough to sell it smile. Oh hey there, she says, all cheerful. We figured since it's just a small creek, it'd be nice to let the community enjoy it. I actually blinked. That's private property, I told her. You're trespassing. One of the others, I think her name was Linda, actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. Oh come on, she says, it's just water. Just water. Yeah, and a house is just wood, right? So I walk back up, grab the laminated copy of my deed I keep sealed under my porch. Because yeah, I've dealt with people like this before, and I hold it up right there. This, I say, says otherwise. That creek is legally mine. Cheryl barely even looks at it. She just waves her hand like she's dismissing a waiter. Well, the HOA voted last month to open it for community use. And that right there is the moment something in me just locked in. Because you don't vote to give away something you don't own. That's not a misunderstanding. That's entitlement with a committee. I didn't argue anymore. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't threaten anything. I just nodded, turned around, and walked back to my house. Because here's the thing. I had cameras. 4 of them, actually, wired across the back lot when I first moved in, running to a private server, not cloud-based, not something you can just wipe clean, and suddenly, I had a feeling I was about to find a lot more than a couple of folding chairs. So I pulled up the footage, hadn't checked it in weeks, and at first, it was just what you'd expect. Them showing up, sitting around, fishing, laughing, leaving, but then I scrolled back further. And that's when it changed. 3 weeks earlier, 9:12 a.m., Cheryl shows up with 2 guys from the HOA committee, and they're carrying a chainsaw. Not kidding. They walk right up to one of the dogwood trees on my side of the bank, my tree, and they cut it down. Clean. No hesitation. Then they drag the trunk over, set it sideways like a bench. 2 days later, they're back with gravel, dumping it along the muddy path, building a walkway. A few days after that, rope swing. Installed. Just like that. And then the worst part, kids. 6 of them, splashing in the creek while the adults sit back, drinking like it's a weekend resort. I remember just sitting there, staring at the screen. One hand gripping the table so hard my knuckles went white, because this wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was destruction, liability, unauthorized construction, and they'd been doing it for weeks like it was perfectly normal. That's when I made 2 calls. First one to a friend of mine, Rachel Kim, real estate attorney, used to be a county prosecutor, sharp as hell. Second one to the sheriff's office. By the afternoon, A deputy named Morales is standing in my kitchen watching the footage, arms crossed. Not saying much at first, just letting it play out. And when it's done, he just exhales and goes, "Yeah, this is not good. Can you cite them?" I ask. He shakes his head. "We're past citations. You want to press charges?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yeah. And that should have been the end of it, right? You catch them, you report them, they back off. That's how it's supposed to work. But with people like Cheryl, when you push back, they don't stop. They escalate." All right, let me pause the story for a second, because what Cheryl and her little committee pulled here, this isn't just annoying neighbor behavior. This is actually a textbook example of how HOAs overstep when nobody checks them. According to standard procedure, an HOA only has authority over properties that are legally within its jurisdiction, meaning if your parcel isn't listed in their governing documents, they can't fine you, regulate you, or vote on anything related to your land, period. And yet, what happens a lot, especially in these suburban edge zones, is that HOA boards start acting like mini-governments, assuming control just because something is nearby or affects the community. From a legal perspective, what they did crosses multiple lines at once: trespassing, property damage, and unauthorized land alteration. But here's where it gets interesting. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. They see a group acting confidently, using official language like "we voted" or "community access approved," and they assume it must be legitimate. That's how authority bias works. You don't question it, because it sounds official. And the lesson here is simple. Confidence doesn't equal legality. Just because someone acts like they're in charge doesn't mean they are. Now, back to what happened next, because this is where things really start to spiral. So yeah, things didn't calm down after that. Not even close. If anything, pressing charges just lit a fire under everything. And for a couple days, it was quiet. Too quiet. Like that weird silence before a storm where you know something's coming. You just don't know what shape it's going to take. Then Rachel calls me that night, and I can already hear it in her voice. That calm, almost amused tone she gets when she knows something's about to go very, very wrong for someone, just not me. She goes, "I reviewed your deed, your survey, the easement language, it's airtight. Your property line extends past the creek's north bank. That tree they cut? 100% yours." And I'm like, okay, good, that's what I thought. But then she adds, "Also, I pulled the HOA's governing documents from the county clerk." Pause. "They don't include your parcel." I actually sat up straight. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she says, "you are not, and have never been, part of that HOA." Now that right there, that's the moment everything flipped. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a group of nosy neighbors overstepping. This was an organization acting like it had authority where it legally had none. And Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. They've been issuing you notices and fines without jurisdiction. That can be considered fraudulent behavior. I remember just laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it almost looped back around to hilarious. So I'm not even in their club? Not even remotely. Next morning, I was at the courthouse before they even opened, filing everything: trespass, vandalism, unauthorized land use. And Rachel sent over the civil suit paperwork before lunch. We weren't just going after damages anymore. We were going after everything. Legal fees, restoration costs, emotional distress, the whole thing. And then, the neighborhood started talking. Word spreads fast in places like that. One neighbor, older guy named Tom, comes up while I'm unloading groceries, gives me this low whistle and goes, "Heard you got Cheryl serve papers." I nod, and he just grins like he's been waiting years for someone to do it. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been pushing around. A couple down the street had gotten daily fines over how they parked in their own driveway. Another woman had been threatened over her mailbox placement. Sound familiar? And suddenly, people started showing up, asking if I could share what I had. So I did. I made a folder, called it HOA Overreach. Started organizing everything: footage, notices, timelines, and people started adding their own stuff. Letters, emails, fines that didn't make sense. Patterns started forming, and none of it looked good for Cheryl. By the weekend, the HOA called an emergency meeting at the community center. I didn't go, didn't need to, but Rachel did, representing me, and she walked in with printed packets for every board member. Evidence, legal notice, documentation proving they had zero authority over my property. And she told me later. Cheryl didn't take it well. Apparently, she turned red, like full-on cranberry red, started arguing with the deputy who was there to observe, raising her voice, trying to spin it like some kind of misunderstanding. But you can't spin hard evidence. You just can't. And then, it started falling apart. By Monday, one of the board members resigned. Another tried to distance herself, claiming she wasn't fully aware of what was happening, which, based on the emails we had, was a bold strategy. The rope swing disappeared overnight. Gravel started getting cleared out quietly, like they thought if they erased it fast enough, it would undo everything. It didn't, because by then, the sheriff's office had already issued formal citations. 5 individuals, Cheryl included, charged with trespassing, unauthorized land alteration, and endangerment. Total fines? Just over $15,000. And here's the kicker. Because they acted outside HOA authority, they couldn't use HOA funds to pay it. Personal liability. Out of pocket. That's when panic really set in. But it still wasn't over, because while all that was happening, the county got involved. See, when Deputy Morales filed the report, it flagged something with the planning department, and a couple days later, an inspector shows up at my property, clipboard in hand, walking the perimeter. I figured he was there to double-check me, but nope. He goes, "You're clean. But your HOA? Not so much." Turns out, the gravel they dumped had disrupted a protected runoff channel. The community garden they were so proud of built about 20 feet onto county land. And suddenly, this wasn't just a local issue anymore. Now you've got environmental compliance involved, code enforcement, all that fun stuff. And once those doors open, they don't close easily. Within a week, there were multiple agencies looking into the HOA. Someone, not me, had forwarded the footage to the Department of Environmental Quality. Another resident filed a complaint about drainage issues from months back. It was like everything they'd been quietly getting away with just surfaced all at once. And then, the real damage came out. Financial records. Subpoenaed. Emails. Reviewed. And buried in all that. Reimbursements. Thousands of dollars approved for maintenance equipment that didn't exist. Payments routed through a landscaping company connected to one of the board members. Receipts that didn't match purchases. It wasn't just overreach anymore. It was fraud. Cheryl was arrested 2 weeks later. Early morning. No drama. Just 2 cruisers pulling up and taking her out while the neighborhood watched through half-open blinds. Another board member got charged right after. Conspiracy to defraud, falsifying records, serious stuff. Meanwhile, my civil case? Fast-tracked. The judge didn't take long. Ruled in my favor, full compensation, plus a court order requiring the HOA to publicly clarify their jurisdiction boundaries. Basically, a legal way of saying, stay in your lane. And then came the moment I didn't expect. At the final hearing, Rachel submitted something new, a petition signed by over 40 residents requesting the removal of the entire HOA board under a clause in their own charter. With 2 members under criminal charges and another already gone, it passed. Just like that. New board. New people. Regular homeowners. No power trip. No clipboard politics. First thing they did? Freeze all fines. Review every policy. Try to clean up the mess. And for a while, it actually worked. Things got quiet again. The creek was restored. I planted a new dogwood where the old one had been cut, added a couple more cameras just in case. But honestly, I wasn't worried anymore. The message had been sent. Or at least, I thought it had. Because about 3 months later, I checked my mail one morning and there's a certified letter from the county tax assessor. It says my property's been flagged for unreported structural additions related to recreational use. And attached to it, a blurry aerial photo. At first, I'm confused. I don't have any structures down there. No deck, no platform, nothing. But then I look closer, and I realize that's not my land. It's the creek bend just past my boundary, county-maintained greenbelt. So now I'm thinking, okay, who built that? And why is my parcel number attached to it? I drove straight to the planning office, pulled the permit logs, and there it was, a permit request for a wildlife observation deck, approved under my parcel ID. Except I never filed it. So I call Rachel, and she doesn't even hesitate. That's fraud. Again, we get the footage, drone surveillance from the assessor's office, and it shows a crew building this wooden platform, fast, efficient, like they're trying to get it done before anyone notices. And mounted on the railing? A sign. Property of Cedar Ridge HOA. I just stared at that for a second, because even after everything, they were still trying. Deputy Morales came back out with a county rep, took one look, and just shook his head. They misfiled permits under your property ID to build on public land. That's not just civil. That's criminal. Next morning, another arrest. Different board member this time. Then another. Turns out, they'd been funneling leftover funds into this project, trying to expand HOA-controlled space using fake documentation. And when it all came out, really came out, there was no saving it. The HOA didn't just get restructured. It got dissolved. Completely. Charter revoked, accounts frozen, assets redistributed under county oversight. No more fines, no more enforcement, no more pretending they had power they never legally held. And that platform? Gone within 72 hours. Like it was never there. And just like that, it was over. For real this time. So yeah, that's how a quiet piece of land with a creek turned into a full-blown legal collapse of an HOA. And if you're sitting there thinking, there's no way it could ever get that far. Trust me, neither did I. I thought it was going to be another annoying neighbor situation, maybe a couple arguments, maybe a warning letter or two, not arrests, not fraud investigations, not an entire organization getting wiped off the map. But that's the thing about situations like this. They don't explode overnight. They build, slowly, quietly, layer by layer, until someone finally pushes back hard enough to expose everything underneath. The lesson here is boundaries matter. And I don't just mean property lines on a survey map. I mean personal boundaries, legal boundaries, the invisible lines that keep power in check. Because once those lines get blurred, even a little, people start testing how far they can go. First, it's a comment about your mailbox. Then it's a notice about your driveway. Then suddenly they're sitting in your backyard telling you they voted to use your land. And if nobody challenges that, it becomes normal. From a legal perspective, what saved me wasn't luck, it was documentation. Having the deed, having the cameras, knowing exactly where my property began and ended. That's what turned this from a he said she said argument into something undeniable. A lot of people rely on assumptions. Oh, it's probably shared. They wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. But assumptions are exactly what people like Cheryl count on. They rely on confusion. They rely on you not wanting to make a big deal out of things. And this is where it gets a little deeper, because this is a psychological trap. Most people are wired to avoid conflict. We'd rather tolerate something uncomfortable than escalate it into a fight. Especially when the other side sounds official, uses words like bylaws, violations, compliance. It creates this illusion of authority that makes you second-guess yourself. You start thinking, maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. And that hesitation? That's the opening. But here's the reality. Authority without accountability is just control wearing a uniform. And the second you stop questioning it, it grows. Now, I'm not saying every HOA is like this. Some are fine, some actually do what they're supposed to do, maintain shared spaces, keep things organized. But when they're not checked, when nobody looks closely at what they can and can't legally enforce, that's when things go sideways. Fast. And honestly, the part that stuck with me the most wasn't even the lawsuits or the arrests. It was how many people came forward after everything started. Neighbors who had been dealing with this stuff for months, even years, just quietly accepting it because they thought they had no choice. It took one pushback, one person saying no, for all of it to unravel. So if you take anything from this, it's this. Know what you actually own, know what rules actually apply to you, and don't let confidence from the other side trick you into giving up ground that's legally yours. Because once you give a little, it rarely stops there. And I'm curious, seriously, have any of you dealt with something like this? HOA overreach, weird neighbor disputes, someone trying to enforce rules that didn't make sense? Because I've got a feeling this isn't as rare as people think. Drop your story in the comments. I read all of them. And trust me, sometimes the quietest neighborhoods have the loudest problems.